It begins with the sun stretching its first warm fingers across our little cul-de-sac, a neat circle of suburban conformity nestled under the expansive blue sky. Our homes, like soldiers in formation, stand side by side, their uniformity interrupted only by the personalities that spill over from the yards and porches. It was here, amidst the manicured lawns and identical mailboxes, that the delicate balance of our community began to unravel, one lawn chair at a time. Karen, the self-appointed arbiter of all things orderly, had always been a fixture in our neighborhood. She moved with the precision of a well-wound clock, her every action calculated and controlled. Her presence was like the click of a metronome, steady and predictable, yet not always welcome. To some, she was a bulwark against chaos. To others, she was a monument to the pettiness that lurked beneath the surface of suburban life. It started with a letter, as these things often do. A crisp, white envelope slipped under my door, the kind used for wedding invitations or eviction notices. Inside, typed in neat, officious font, was a decree that my lawn chairs, the charming mismatched set I'd collected over the years, were in violation of the HOA's aesthetic guidelines. I read the words, let them roll around in my mind, and then set the letter aside. There was no malice in it, only a cold, bureaucratic detachment. To anyone else, the chairs might have seemed like a mismatched jumble of colors and styles, but to me, each one was a story, a memory etched into metal and fabric. The green Adirondack chair, worn by years of sun and rain, was a relic from my first house. The rickety metal one, with peeling paint and a persistent squeak, had been a gift from a friend long gone. These chairs were not just objects. They were placeholders for moments, markers of time and experience. Ignoring the letter was an act of quiet rebellion, a refusal to let conformity erase the past I had pieced together. But Karen's resolve was as unyielding as winter frost. She appeared one morning, clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning my yard like a hawk searching for prey. A slight twitch of her eyebrow was the only sign of her disapproval as she made her way to my front door. For days, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers, a symphony of speculation and schadenfreude. The sight of Karen standing on my porch, her posture straight and unbending, was a spectacle for the community. I imagined myself the protagonist of a small-town drama, where the stakes were lawn chairs and the tension palpable. In the days that followed, a plan began to form in my mind, quiet and deliberate. There was a kind of poetry in turning the tables, in transforming the mundane into the extraordinary. If Karen wished to bring the community's attention to my supposed transgressions, I would return the favor. My decision was not born out of spite, but a gentle nudge to the universe, a reminder that authority unchallenged becomes tyranny. And so the idea of a town hall on Karen's driveway took root, sprouting from the soil of irony and good-natured defiance. It was not an act of war, but an invitation to dialogue, to examine our lives and the rules that govern them. I imagined the chairs lined up in neat rows, a mosaic of color and history, as neighbors gathered on the concrete expanse of Karen's pristine driveway. In the quiet moments before dawn, I envisioned the gathering as a communion of sorts, a chance to weave our individual stories into the tapestry of the community. The thought brought a smile to my face, a gentle curve of lips, a silent laugh at the absurdity and brilliance of it all. Each step toward that morning felt like the turning of pages in a story not yet told. The lawn chairs, once symbols of nonconformity, would become the seats of reconciliation, the stage for a shared narrative. And somewhere beneath the surface, I hoped Karen might find herself, not as the antagonist, but as a vital piece of the unfolding tale. The sun rose sluggishly the morning after our impromptu town hall. Its light tried to seep through the thickening clouds, casting a diffused glow over the neighborhood like the flickering bulb of a disinterested street lamp. Traces of the previous night's gathering lingered on Karen's driveway. Scuffed marks from the folding chairs, scattered crumbs from hastily consumed snacks. It was a spectacle that, for a few blissful hours, had painted the sameness of suburban life with vibrant streaks of novelty. But revelry and rebellion come with their costs. As I opened my front door to retrieve the morning paper, the crisp air carried whispers of Karen's retaliation. The inkling of her next move was almost tangible, like static before a thunderstorm. She would not let this go unanswered. Not Karen, with her ironclad sense of propriety and authority. Sure enough, the HOA newsletter arrived, thick with perfumed pages and suffocating with platitudes. Tucked within was a new set of regulations. Each rule, a testament to Karen's talent for pettiness, felt designed with the precision of a tailor measuring for a suit. Lawn chairs had to conform to a specific shade of beige. Wind chimes were restricted to a maximum of 5 melodic tones. Garden gnomes were outlawed entirely, an edict that seemed to target old Mr. Jenkins and his whimsical collection. Pages of these absurdities, each more nonsensical than the last. I couldn't help but marvel at the creativity that went into crafting such micromanagement. My mailbox, too, was graced with a citation. The grass along my driveway, it seemed, was exactly half an inch taller than HOA regulations allowed. A violation of monumental consequence, surely. I pictured Karen, measuring tape in hand, crouched low like a predator in wait. The gossip spread like wildfire. Through the neighborhood, through the veins of suburbia itself. Karen's kingdom strengthened by murmurs and speculation. The neighborhood newsletter had become our very own tabloid, with Karen as the star of endless stories spun with both resentment and reluctant admiration. Even those who grumbled under their breath couldn't deny her tenacity. Irony dripped from every interaction. Neighbors who never glanced my way before now exchanged knowing looks. Sympathy mixed with a peculiar satisfaction at seeing me, the quiet rebel, being held accountable. It was a game to them, and Karen played the queen on a board where everyone else was a lowly pawn. As the days passed, Karen's drive for control morphed into something grotesquely intricate. Her power reached into corners of the neighborhood that had never before seen the light of scrutiny. Her name was on every tongue, from the gossipy group at morning coffee clatches to the joggers on their morning routes. And yet, a quiet resolve built within me. The absurdities, the rules, the citations, they all became the fuel for a fire I hadn't known I needed. I watched and listened, absorbing the neighborhood's currents, sensing an undercurrent of restlessness beneath the surface compliance. This wouldn't be the end. Not while the air crackled with potential. Not while I still held cards Karen couldn't see. The game was far from over. The sun hovered low in the sky, casting long shadows across the meticulously trimmed lawns of our neighborhood. Karen had already begun her morning patrol, clipboard in hand, eyes like a hawk scanning for any infractions that dared to disrupt her vision of suburban perfection. I watched from my porch, hidden behind the curling pages of a notebook, documenting every move like a naturalist studying a rare, persistent bird. The notebook had become my confidant, absorbing my frustrations and shaping them into something tangible, something subtle, yet potent. Every note was a brushstroke, painting a picture of control and pettiness that I intended to reveal to the entire community. Karen had overstepped, trying to ban my lawn chairs because they didn't adhere to her unwritten rules of aesthetic conformity was the final straw. Those chairs, vibrant in their floral patterns, were a splash of rebellion against her monochrome world. They were a declaration of identity in a sea of sameness. Preparations for the town hall were meticulous. I wanted to ensure my message was clear, my actions unassailable. I drafted a plan, each step as precise as the careful mowing lines in her own yard. Flyers printed with understated elegance. Invitations to neighbors folded and slipped discreetly into mailboxes, their corners peeking out like secrets waiting to be uncovered. The evening of the town hall arrived with a cooling breeze, the kind that whispers of change. I arranged chairs on Karen's driveway, a silent statement of resilience and community. Ironically, from her own tool of control. Neighbors arrived, curious and buzzing with anticipation, the soft murmur of voices rising like cicadas at dusk. I stood before them, words carefully measured, their weight magnified by the silence. I let the notebook fall open, revealing its contents to the assembled crowd. The pages fluttered like wings, each one bearing witness to Karen's reign of micro-tyranny. I felt the shift, a tide turning as eyes widened and heads nodded in quiet agreement. Karen stood in the background, arms crossed, her face a mask of controlled fury. I could feel her gaze, sharp enough to etch glass, as she realized the power of collective acknowledgement, the strength in unity against unilateral decrees. Her silence, a reluctant concession, was the evening's only dialogue. A symphony of unspoken understanding played out in the shared glances of my neighbors. I didn't need to say much more. The evidence was before them, undeniable and stark. There was a sense of liberation in the air, an unspoken agreement that we were no longer passive occupants of Karen's domain, but active participants in shaping our community. As the crowd dispersed, I lingered, feeling the night settle around me, heavy with the promise of change. The driveway, once a symbol of Karen's dominance, now felt like a canvas, painted with the afterglow of solidarity. And as I gathered my notebook, a soft breeze ruffled the pages, as if nature itself was grateful for the small, quiet revolution that had taken place. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the kitchen table. Its warmth was deceptive, a gentle facade over the simmering chaos beneath. I sat, coffee in hand, staring out at the backyard where the infamous lawn chairs stood. They were silent witnesses to the absurd warfare that had unfolded, innocuous yet powerful symbols of resistance against the tyrannical grip of our HOA president, Karen. Karen, even her name evoked an eye roll. She had, with her perfect bob and clipboard, declared war on my modest attempt at backyard leisure. The petty commandments she issued had a singular goal: to eradicate any semblance of joy that didn't conform to her pristine vision. My lawn chairs, with their vibrant cushions, were a glaring insult to her beige universe. The town hall on her driveway had only been the beginning. There was a quiet satisfaction in watching neighbors converge, folding chairs in tow, a parade of rebellion right up to her doorstep. But satisfaction wasn't enough. Karen was relentless. Her latest missive, a meticulously worded manifesto on the inappropriateness of my choice in outdoor furniture, was the final straw. By the time her letter arrived, I'd already started devising a strategy. Revenge is best served legal, after all. With a quiet determination, I delved into the arcane world of HOA bylaws and municipal codes, uncovering loopholes and inconsistencies that played like an off-key symphony to my ears. Each discovery was a note in a crescendo building towards inevitable retribution. I reached out to a local attorney, the kind with a reputation for relishing these neighborhood skirmishes. Our conversations were brief, transactional, but each one infused with an undercurrent of shared humor at the absurdity of it all. He shared my vision, not of vengeance, but of justice. Liberation from the tyranny of one woman's obsession with control. Preparation was meticulous. Every clause, every subparagraph examined under the relentless scrutiny of logic and legality. At times, the sheer volume of minutiae threatened to overwhelm, each sentence a potential pitfall, each word a possible ally or enemy. It was a legal labyrinth, but I was determined to navigate it with the precision of a chess master plotting a checkmate. The day I filed the paperwork was unremarkable in its normalcy. The sky was an unbroken expanse of blue, as if reflecting the clarity of my purpose. I walked back from the post office, the receipt crumpled in my pocket, a tangible token of the action taken. There was no fanfare, no dramatic thunderclap, just the quiet satisfaction of having set the wheels of justice in motion. In the days that followed, I watched from the sidelines as the inevitable unfolded. Notifications arrived at Karen's door, each one a reminder of the legal reckoning that loomed. Her composure, once unshakable, began to fray at the edges. Neighbors, once silent or subtly aligned, found their voices. Whispered conversations in cul-de-sacs grew bolder, a community awakening to its own power. Karen's fortress was crumbling, not with a crash, but with the steady erosion of authority undermined by its own excesses. The irony was palpable, a lesson in hubris for all who wielded power with such reckless disregard for those they governed. My lawn chairs, now symbols of something far greater, stood resolute amidst the unraveling. When the day finally came for our hearing, I saw it in her eyes, a flicker of realization, of defeat. There was no triumph in it for me, only the quiet validation of having navigated the maze of bureaucracy and emerged victorious. The chairs remained, unyielding against the backdrop of change. And I, a reluctant hero in this suburban saga, felt a peaceful resilience settle in. The sun was setting as I returned home, casting long shadows across the familiar landscape. It felt right, this moment of tranquility after the storm. I placed my coffee cup beside me, sat back in my lawn chair, and watched the twilight deepen. Some battles are won not with might, but with the patience to see justice done. The morning sun sliced through the blinds, its warm fingers nudging me awake. The events of the previous night were still fresh, like ink yet to dry. Karen's driveway had glowed under the streetlights, a makeshift stage for our impromptu town hall. With each passing hour, the crescendo of voices had risen, a symphony composed of discontent, determination, and a hint of rebellion. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail. The neighborhood had gathered, not with torches and pitchforks, but with an unexpected unity that had surprised even the most optimistic among us. Chairs had been arranged in neat rows, an ironic homage to the very items that had sparked this confrontation. While Karen watched from her window, her silhouette a dark shadow, the community found its voice. This wasn't just about lawn chairs. It had never been. It was about control, about one person trying to impose her will with the precision of a tyrant. But this was not her kingdom, and we were not her subjects. I rose, the wooden floor cool beneath my feet, and wandered into the kitchen. The coffee pot gurgled its familiar tune, a comforting sound that cut through the morning silence. I poured a mug and stepped outside, savoring the quietude that blanketed the street. The air was crisp, a promise of autumn's coming embrace. Karen's house stood opposite, its walls no longer intimidating but somehow smaller, its grandeur diminished by the weight of its occupants' actions. I could almost see her behind those curtains, calculating her next move, her mind a battlefield of plans and counterplans. Yet, there was a new resolve within me, a calm assurance that came from knowing a shift had occurred. As I sipped my coffee, memories of the night flowed back like a gentle stream. Neighbors had spoken, their voices full of stories, grievances, and hopes. Each word had woven a tapestry of shared experiences, a tapestry that Karen could not unravel with a mere wave of her hand. The night had reached its zenith when an elderly neighbor, old enough to remember more turbulent times, had spoken with a clarity and brevity that silenced the crowd. Her words lingered even now, like a lingering fragrance that refuses to fade. With that, the tide had turned. Karen, for all her posturing and proclamations, stood not at the center, but on the periphery. Her authority, once formidable, was now a relic of a past she could not reclaim. She had been sidelined, not through force, but through the simple power of a community finding its shared strength. As the sun climbed higher, the noise of life began to stir. Doors opened, cars hummed to life, and children's laughter echoed down the street. The world moved on, as it always does, but with a new rhythm, a gentle, harmonious beat that spoke of resilience and renewal. I finished my coffee, feeling the warmth seep into my bones. The lawn chairs remained steadfast sentinels of our small rebellion. They stood not just as objects, but as symbols of a victory that was as much internal as it was external. Karen had tried to ban my lawn chairs, to silence our gathering through rules and regulations. But in the end, it was more than just brightly colored fabric and aluminum frames. It was about standing firm, about knowing when to fight and when to let the world come to you. The day stretched ahead, full of promise and potential. There was work to be done, but not the kind that required grand gestures or fiery speeches. It was the quiet work of building, of nurturing the small connections that form the bedrock of community. And as I turned to go back inside, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Karen's curtains twitched as she peered out. A silent acknowledgement passed between us. Perhaps she knew this battle was over. Perhaps she knew it was time to retreat. For now, the neighborhood was a little more ours than hers, and that was enough.